The morning started like any other morning in our beautiful Victorian home. I was preparing breakfast for Marcus, my husband of 12 years, while the autumn sunlight streamed through our kitchen windows. Everything seemed perfect on the surface, the polished marble countertops, the fresh flowers I arranged daily, the smell of coffee brewing in our expensive machine. But underneath this facade of domestic bliss, something had been slowly dying for months. Marcus sat at the breakfast table, scrolling through his phone with that cold expression that had become his default look whenever he was around me. He barely acknowledged the perfectly prepared eggs Benedict I placed in front of him, the same dish that used to make him smile and kiss my forehead in the early days of our marriage. "Elena," he said without looking up from his screen, his voice carrying that tone of irritation that had become so familiar. "Mother wants to see us today. She says it is urgent." I felt a familiar knot form in my stomach. Marcus's mother, Catherine Whitmore, had never liked me. From the moment Marcus brought me home as his fiancée, she made it clear that I wasn't good enough for her precious son. I was just a middle-class girl who worked as a librarian not the wealthy socialite she had envisioned for her heir. "Of course," I replied quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "What time does she want us there?" 2 o'clock, and Elena, Marcus finally looked up, his blue eyes cold as winter ice. "Try to dress appropriately this time. You know how Mother feels about your wardrobe choices." I nodded silently, swallowing the hurt that always came with his casual cruelty. Over the years, Marcus had slowly chipped away at my confidence with comments like these. Nothing I did was ever good enough. My clothes were too simple, my conversation too boring, my background too humble. I had tried so hard to fit into his world, but I was constantly reminded that I would always be an outsider. The drive to Catherine's mansion was silent, except for the soft hum of Marcus's BMW. I stared out the window at the familiar wealthy neighborhoods, wondering when our relationship had become so cold. There was a time when Marcus and I would talk for hours, when he would hold my hand during car rides, when he looked at me like I was his whole world. Now, I felt like a stranger sitting next to him. Catherine's estate was as imposing as ever, a sprawling Georgian mansion set on 20 acres of perfectly manicured grounds. The circular driveway was lined with centuries-old oak trees that seemed to whisper secrets as we drove past. I always felt small walking up to that massive front door with its brass knocker and stained glass panels. Marcus didn't wait for me as we walked to the entrance. He strode ahead with the confidence of someone who had grown up in this world of privilege, while I followed behind, feeling like an intruder in my carefully chosen navy dress and pearls. Catherine's housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, greeted us at the door with the same polite but cool expression she reserved for me. "Good afternoon, Mr. Marcus. Mrs. Whitmore is waiting for you in the library." The library had always been Catherine's domain, a vast room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, most of which I suspected had never been read. Catherine sat in her favorite wingback chair, by the fireplace, looking as regal and intimidating as always. Even at 78, she carried herself with the bearing of someone who had never been denied anything in her life. "Marcus, darling," she said, rising to embrace her son. Her greeting for me was considerably cooler. "Elena." "Hello, Catherine," I replied, using her first name as she had insisted years ago. "You are looking well." She ignored my pleasantry, and gestured for us to sit on the uncomfortable antique sofa across from her chair. "I asked you both here because we need to discuss something important. I am not getting any younger, and there are arrangements that need to be made." Marcus leaned forward, his business instincts kicking in. "Are you talking about the will, Mother?" Catherine nodded gravely. "Among other things, Marcus, you know that everything will come to you when I am gone. The house, the properties, the investments, it is all part of the family legacy that has been passed down through generations of Whitmore men." I felt that familiar sting of exclusion. Even after 12 years of marriage, I was still treated like an outsider to the family legacy. Catherine continued speaking as if I weren't even in the room. "However," she said, her sharp blue eyes fixed on her son, "there are certain expectations that come with this inheritance. The Whitmore name must be preserved and protected. The family line must continue." Marcus shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Mother, we've discussed this before. Elena and we've been trying for children, but But nothing has come of it, Catherine finished curtly. 12 years, Marcus, 12 years without producing an heir. Perhaps it is time to consider that some matches simply aren't fruitful. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my cheeks burn with shame and anger, but I remained silent. Over the years, I had learned that defending myself in front of Catherine only made things worse. Mother, that is not fair, Marcus said, though his protests sounded half-hearted. These things take time sometimes. Catherine waved his objection away. Time we don't have, dear. I am not going to live forever, and I need to know that everything I've worked to preserve will continue after I am gone. She turned her cold gaze to me. Elena, surely you understand. A woman's primary duty in marriage is to provide children. If she cannot fulfill that basic function. I couldn't stay silent any longer. Catherine, with all due respect, there are many reasons why a couple might struggle with fertility. It is not necessarily. Are you suggesting, Catherine interrupted, her voice dangerously quiet, that the problem lies with my son? The room fell into an icy silence. I realized I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. In Catherine's world, the Whitmore men were beyond reproach. Any failure had to be the woman's fault. Marcus didn't defend me, he sat there in silence, and his lack of support felt like another betrayal. I was completely alone in that cold, elegant room. Catherine smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I think we all understand each other perfectly, Elena. You've been given every opportunity to fulfill your role in this family. The fact that you haven't suggests that perhaps this arrangement isn't working for anyone involved. What are you saying? I asked, though I was beginning to understand with growing horror. I am saying, Catherine replied smoothly, that sometimes the kindest thing is to admit when a situation isn't working and allow everyone to move forward with their lives. Marcus finally spoke, but his words shattered what remained of my heart. Elena, maybe Mother has a point. We've both been unhappy for so long. Maybe it is time to consider other options. Other options. He couldn't even say the word divorce directly. After 12 years of marriage, of trying to be the perfect wife, of enduring his mother's constant criticism, and his growing coldness, this was how it ended. Not with passion or anger, but with clinical discussion of other options. The drive home was the longest of my life. Marcus didn't speak, and I was too numb to break the silence. When we reached our house, which suddenly didn't feel like home anymore, Marcus went straight to his study and closed the door. I stood in our foyer, surrounded by the life we had built together, and realized that it had all been an illusion. That night, Marcus slept in the guest room. He didn't explain why, but he didn't need to. The message was clear. The next morning, I woke up alone in our king-sized bed and knew that my marriage was over. The divorce papers arrived 3 days later. I was in the garden, tending to the roses that Catherine had always criticized as too common. When the courier rang the doorbell, my hands were still dirty from the soil when I signed for the thick manila envelope that would destroy my life. Inside was a formal petition for divorce, along with a property settlement that took my breath away with its cruelty. Marcus was claiming everything: the house, the cars, the investments, even the savings account that I had contributed to with my own earnings. According to the documents, I had no right to any marital assets, because I had failed to fulfill the basic obligations of marriage. The legal language was cold and brutal, but the message was clear. I was being discarded like a broken appliance, with nothing to show for 12 years of my life. I called Marcus at his office, my hands shaking as I dialed. His secretary put me through immediately, which surprised me until I realized he had probably been expecting this call. Elena, he said, his voice professionally polite, I assume you received the papers. Marcus, we need to talk about this. Surely we can work something out without. There is nothing to work out, he interrupted. My lawyer says this is the most straightforward approach. You'll get a small settlement to help you get back on your feet, but the house and major assets need to stay in the family. The family? I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. I thought I was family too. Elena, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You have to know this hasn't been working for either of us. I am giving you a chance to start over. Find someone who can make you happy. And you? Have you already found someone who can make you happy? The pause before his answer told me everything I needed to know. That is not relevant to our discussion. But of course it was relevant. I learned later that Marcus had been seeing someone for months. A young associate at his law firm named Victoria, 28 years old, blonde, ambitious, and from the right kind of family, everything I apparently wasn't. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal consultations and failed negotiations. I hired a lawyer with the little money I had in my personal account, but he was clearly outmatched by Marcus's high-powered legal team. Every attempt to secure a fair settlement was met with threats and ultimatums. Mrs. Whitmore, my lawyer explained apologetically, your husband's legal position is quite strong. The prenuptial agreement you signed significantly limits your claim to marital assets. And without children, he didn't need to finish. Without children, I had no leverage, no reason for the court to be generous with alimony or property division. I was exactly what Catherine had always said I was: expendable. The final hearing was scheduled for a cold Tuesday in November. I sat in the courthouse, wearing my best dress, watching as Marcus's lawyers presented their case for why I deserved nothing after 12 years of marriage. Marcus sat at the plaintiff's table looking handsome and composed, occasionally whispering to Victoria, who had shown up for moral support. My own representation was weak and unprepared. When it came time to present my case, all we could offer were emotional appeals about my contributions to the household and my years of loyalty. It wasn't enough. The judge, clearly influenced by the prenuptial agreement and the lack of children, awarded me a minimal settlement fee, barely enough to rent a small apartment for a year. Everything else went to Marcus. The house, the cars, the investments, even the furniture I had carefully chosen over the years. As I walked out of that courthouse, I felt truly alone for the first time in my adult life. I had no home, no substantial money, no career to fall back on after years of being the perfect housewife. At 38 years old, I was starting over with nothing. I moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment across town, taking only the few personal items Marcus had allowed me to keep. The contrast between my new life and my old one was stark and depressing. Instead of waking up in a beautiful Victorian home, I opened my eyes to cracked ceiling paint and the sound of traffic from the busy street below. The hardest part wasn't the loss of luxury fee, it was the loss of identity. For 12 years, I had been Mrs. Marcus Whitmore. I had defined myself through my role as his wife, and now I didn't know who I was supposed to be. I tried to find work, but 12 years out of the job market had left my skills outdated. The library positions I applied for wanted experience with new computer systems I had never used. Retail jobs went to younger applicants. I was trapped in that terrible middle ground, too educated for menial work, but too inexperienced for professional positions. Meanwhile, I watched from a distance as Marcus's life improved dramatically. His engagement to Victoria was announced in the society pages just 3 months after our divorce was finalized. The photo showed them at some charity gala, both looking radiant and perfectly matched. The caption mentioned their plans for a spring wedding and Victoria's impressive legal career. Catherine must have been thrilled. I fell into a deep depression during those first months alone. Some days, I barely got out of bed. I lived on cheap groceries and watched as my small settlement dwindled with each passing week. I felt invisible, forgotten, like I had never mattered at all. But then, something unexpected happened. It started with a phone call on a rainy Thursday in February. "Is this Elena Whitmore?" The voice was elderly, refined, and unfamiliar. "It is Elena Morrison now," I corrected, having taken back my maiden name. "Who is this?" "My name is Harrison Blackwood. I was Mrs. Catherine Whitmore's attorney for many years. I am afraid I have some sad news. Mrs. Whitmore passed away yesterday evening." I sat down heavily on my second-hand couch, absorbing the shock. Catherine was gone. Despite everything she had put me through, I felt an unexpected wave of grief. She had been a significant part of my life for 12 years. Even if that relationship had been difficult, "I am sorry for your loss," I said automatically. "And Marcus Fay, how is he handling it?" "Mr. Whitmore is understandably grief-stricken," Mr. Blackwood replied. "However, that is not why I am calling. Mrs. Whitmore left specific instructions for me to contact you regarding her will." I don't understand. I am not family anymore." Mrs. Whitmore felt differently. "Could you come to my office tomorrow afternoon? There are some things we need to discuss in person." I almost said no. The last thing I needed was another humiliation from the Whitmore family, but curiosity got the better of me. What could Catherine possibly have wanted to discuss with me after death? Mr. Blackwood's office was in an old building downtown, the kind of place that radiated old money and older secrets. His secretary showed me into a wood-paneled conference room where the elderly lawyer was waiting with a thick file spread out on the mahogany table. "Please sit down," he said kindly. "I know this must be confusing for you." "It is," I admitted. "Catherine made it very clear that I wasn't part of the family. Why would she mention me in her will?" Mr. Blackwood adjusted his glasses and opened the file. Mrs. Whitmore was a complicated woman. Publicly, she maintained certain appearances and expectations. Privately, she had some very different feelings about many things. He pulled out a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Catherine's distinctive handwriting. "She asked me to give you this first, before we discuss the legal matters." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written on Catherine's personal stationery. "Fame, dear Elena. Fake if you are reading this. Then I am gone, and my son has likely treated you with the same callous disregard I showed you during my lifetime. For this, I owe you an apology that I was too proud to give while I lived. Faye, you must understand, Faye, I spent my entire life in a world where women are valued only for what they can provide to men. I married Charles Whitmore when I was 19, not for love, but because it was expected. I gave him an heir and played the perfect wife for 43 years, never once pursuing my own interests or dreams. Faye, when you married Marcus, I saw in you something I had never had, Faye, genuine love for your husband. You didn't marry him for his money or his family name. You married him because you loved him. This terrified me because it reminded me of everything I had sacrificed. Faye treated you poorly, Elena, because I was jealous of your authenticity. I criticized you for being too common, too simple, too real, when in truth, these were the very qualities that made you better than all of us. Faye, the irony is that while I was busy trying to break your spirit, you were becoming the daughter I never had. You visited me when you didn't have to. You listened to my stories about the old days. You cared for me during my illnesses with a tenderness that my own son rarely showed. You loved me despite my cruelty, and that is a gift I never deserved. Faye, I know Marcus has discarded you like yesterday's newspaper, convinced that you are worthless because you couldn't give him children. What he doesn't know, Faye, what I never told him, Faye, is that the problem was never with you. Charles and I struggled with fertility for years before Marcus was finally conceived. It runs in the Whitmore bloodline, but we always blamed the wives. It was easier that way. Faye, I have watched my son become the same cold, calculating man his father was, and I take responsibility for raising him to value money over love, status over character. But I will not let him destroy you the way this family destroyed me. Faye, Anna, you were the daughter of my heart, the one bright light in my bitter old age. You deserve so much more than the cruelties my family offered you. Faye, trust Mr. Blackwood. He has been my confidant for many years and will help you understand what I have done to try to make amends. Faye, with love and regret. Faye, Catherine Faye, I was crying by the time I finished reading. The woman who had made my life so difficult had also, apparently, been fighting her own battles with the same system that had crushed me. "I don't understand," I said to Mr. Blackwood, wiping my eyes. "This doesn't sound like the Catherine I knew. The Catherine you knew was performing a role, just as she did her entire life." He replied gently, "The real Catherine was quite different. She came to me about 5 years ago with some very specific instructions about her estate planning." He pulled out another set of documents. "Mrs. Whitmore's will is quite complex. Publicly, it appears that everything goes to Marcus, just as everyone expected. The main house, the family investments, the trust fund, Faye, all of it passes to him as the sole male heir." My heart sank. Even in death, Catherine was maintaining the family tradition of excluding me. However, Mr. Blackwood continued, "What Marcus doesn't know is that Mrs. Whitmore spent the last decade quietly transferring the most valuable assets into a separate trust. The house he is inheriting is mortgaged to the hilt. The investments he thinks he is getting are mostly worthless stocks she held onto for sentimental reasons. The family money, Faye, the real money, Faye, is elsewhere." I stared at him in confusion. I don't understand what this has to do with me. Elena, you are the sole beneficiary of the Catherine Whitmore Charitable Trust, which now holds approximately $47 million in assets, including some of the most valuable real estate in the city. The words didn't compute at first. I heard them, but they seemed to bounce off my brain without sticking. I am sorry, what did you just say? You are now worth $47 million, Elena. Mrs. Whitmore has also left you her private residence, Faye, the one she maintains separately from the family estate. It is a beautiful historic home in the Garden District, completely paid for and maintained by a generous endowment. I felt dizzy. This can't be real. There has to be a mistake. Mr. Blackwood smiled. It is quite real. Mrs. Whitmore was very thorough in her planning. She knew Marcus would contest the will if he discovered the truth, so she structured everything to appear as if he was the primary beneficiary. By the time he realizes what actually happened, it will be far too late to challenge legally. But why? I whispered. Why would she do this for me? Because, Mr. Blackwood said, she recognized in you the woman she never allowed herself to be. She saw your strength, your kindness, your authenticity, and she wanted to give you the power to live life on your own terms. She also wanted to teach her son a lesson about the value of true worth versus inherited privilege. The next few hours passed in a haze of legal documents, account transfers, and instructions. I signed papers that I barely understood, authorizing the movement of more money than I had ever imagined possessing. Mr. Blackwood explained the structure of the trust, the property holdings, and the various investments that Catherine had carefully cultivated over the years. There is one more thing, he said as our meeting was drawing to a close. Mrs. Whitmore left specific instructions about how and when this information should be revealed to Marcus and the rest of the family. What kind of instructions? She wanted you to have time to adjust to your new circumstances first, to find your footing, so to speak. She suggested waiting until Marcus's wedding day. I thought about Marcus and Victoria, probably busy planning their spring wedding, believing they were about to inherit a fortune that would set them up for life. They had no idea that Catherine had outsmarted them all. She really thought of everything, didn't she? I mused. Catherine Whitmore was many things, but she was never careless with details. Mr. Blackwood agreed. She spent years planning this moment. I left his office in a daze, carrying a folder full of documents that had just transformed my entire existence. I was no longer Elena Morrison, struggling divorcee living in a cramped apartment. I was Elena Morrison, philanthropist and property owner, with the resources to do whatever I wanted with my life. The first thing I did was nothing for 3 weeks. I continued living in my small apartment, working my part-time job at a bookstore and processing what had happened. The money felt surreal, like a dream I might wake up from at any moment, but Mr. Blackwood's daily phone calls, confirming various account transfers and property maintenance issues, gradually convinced me it was real. Slowly I began to make changes. I quit the bookstore job that had been slowly crushing my spirit. I hired a personal financial advisor to help me understand my new wealth. I bought a new wardrobe, Faye, not flashy or expensive, just clothes that made me feel confident and comfortable. Most importantly, I began planning my future for the first time in years. I had choices. I could travel. I could start a business. I could go back to school. I could dedicate my life to charity work. The possibilities were endless and exhilarating, but I wasn't ready to reveal the truth yet. Marcus's wedding was still 2 months away, and I wanted to honor Catherine's wishes about the timing. I also wanted to see how this played out naturally, without my interference. Meanwhile, Marcus was dealing with his own problems. The family fortune he thought he had inherited was turning out to be far less liquid than he had expected. The house came with massive maintenance costs and tax bills that were draining his resources. The investments Catherine had left him were performing poorly, and his lawyers were having trouble accessing the cash accounts that should have supported the estate. I heard about his struggles through mutual friends who didn't know about my own transformation. Marcus was apparently becoming increasingly stressed and short-tempered as he tried to figure out where Catherine had hidden the family money. He is convinced there is more somewhere. My former neighbor told me over coffee. He has hired investigators and forensic accountants, but they can't find anything. It is like Catherine took the real money with her to the grave. If she only knew how close to the truth she was. As Marcus's wedding day approached, I made my decision about how to handle the revelation. I wouldn't crash the ceremony, or make a dramatic scene instead. I would let the truth emerge naturally, just as Catherine had planned. The wedding was held at the Whitmore estate on a beautiful Saturday in May. I watched from a distance as guests arrived in expensive cars, all dressed in their finest attire. Victoria looked stunning in her designer gown, and Marcus appeared handsome and confident in his custom tuxedo. They had no idea that this would be the last day of their old lives. The revelation came 3 days after the wedding, just as Catherine had orchestrated. Mr. Blackwood arranged for the delivery of certain documents that Marcus needed to see, documents that revealed the true state of his inheritance, and the existence of the trust that had been funding his lifestyle. I was in my new home, Faye Catherine's beautiful Garden District mansion, Faye, when Marcus called. The house was everything Catherine's letter had promised: elegant, comfortable, and filled with warmth that the family estate had never possessed. "Elena," Marcus's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "We need to talk. There has been some kind of mistake with Mother's estate." "What kind of mistake?" I asked calmly, though my heart was racing. "According to these documents, there is a trust that you..." "Elena, this can't be right. You need to fix this." "Fix what, Marcus? Don't play games with me." His composure was cracking. "You somehow manipulated my mother into changing her will. You stole what rightfully belongs to the family." "I didn't steal anything, Marcus. Your mother made her own choices about her money. This is fraud. I am going to contest this. I am going to prove that you coerced her or tricked her somehow." I took a deep breath, feeling a strength I hadn't known I possessed. "Marcus, you are welcome to try, but I think you'll find that your mother was very thorough in documenting her decision-making process. She left quite a detailed paper trail explaining exactly why she chose to structure her estate the way she did." "What are you talking about?" "She wrote letters, Marcus. Letters explaining how disappointed she was in the man you became. Letters describing how you threw away a good marriage for a trophy wife. Letters detailing your callous treatment of the one person in the family who genuinely loved both of you." There was silence on the other end of the line. "She saw through you, Marcus, just like I finally did. She realized that you valued money over people, status over character, and she decided that her legacy should go to someone who would use it to build something meaningful, instead of just spending it on expensive toys." "Elena, please." His voice had changed, becoming the pleading tone I remembered from our early relationship. "We can work something out. We can share this. Victoria and I, we're already struggling with the estate costs. I need this money." "No, Marcus. You need to learn what it is like to build a life based on your own efforts instead of inherited wealth, just like you forced me to do." "This isn't over," he said, his voice hard again. "I'll fight this." "You are welcome to try," I repeated, "but I think you'll find that $47 million can afford very good lawyers." After I hung up, I sat in Catherine's library, Faye, my library now, Faye, and felt a profound sense of peace. I wasn't angry at Marcus anymore. I was grateful to him. Actually, his cruelty had freed me from a marriage that was slowly suffocating me, and his mother's guilt had given me the tools to rebuild my life on my own terms. 6 months later, I was reading in that same library when Mrs. Patterson Faye, who had stayed on as my housekeeper, Faye, announced that I had visitors. Marcus and Victoria stood in my foyer, looking much less prosperous than they had at their wedding. Marcus had aged visibly in the months since our confrontation. Victoria looked uncomfortable and out of place. "Hello, Marcus," I said calmly. "Victoria, Elena," Marcus began, his voice subdued. "We came to ask for your help." I raised an eyebrow. "My help?" Victoria spoke for the first time. "The estate. We're going to lose it. The maintenance costs, the taxes, we can't afford it. Marcus's law practice isn't generating enough income to cover the expenses." "I see," I replied. "And you thought I might be willing to help you keep a house that you used to throw me out of." Marcus had the grace to look ashamed. "Elena, I know I hurt you. I know I was cruel, but we have nowhere else to turn." I studied them both for a long moment. They looked desperate, humbled, nothing like the confident couple who had celebrated their triumph at my expense. "I'll make you a deal," I said finally. "I'll buy the estate from you for fair market value. you'll have enough money to start over somewhere else. Maybe learn to live within your means. Hope flickered in Marcus's eyes. Really? With one condition, I continued. I want a written apology, not just to me, but to be published in the society pages where everyone can see it. I want you to publicly acknowledge that you mistreated me and take responsibility for your actions. Marcus's jaw tightened. Even in his desperation, his pride was fighting the request. Victoria, more practical than her husband, nudged him with her elbow. Marcus, we don't have a choice. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. I'll do it. The apology appeared in the Sunday Society section 2 weeks later. It was a full-page letter in which Marcus detailed his mistreatment of me, acknowledged his mother's wisdom in recognizing my worth, and publicly asked for forgiveness. It was humiliating for him, but it was also honest. Faye, probably the first completely honest thing he had said in years. The reaction was swift and brutal. The same social circle that had once celebrated Marcus's divorce from his inappropriate first wife now condemned him for his cruelty. His law practice lost several major clients who didn't want to be associated with someone who treated women so poorly. Victoria left him within a month, apparently deciding that a man who had fallen so far from grace wasn't worth her investment. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall. If anything, I felt pity. Marcus had been raised in a system that taught him to value all the wrong things, and now he was paying the price for those lessons. As for me, I used my inheritance to create the foundation Catherine had always dreamed of. Faye One, that helped women rebuild their lives after divorce, abuse, or other trauma. I funded job training programs, legal aid services, and counseling centers. I wanted to give other women the second chance that Catherine had given me. I never remarried. After 12 years of defining myself through my relationship with a man, I discovered the joy of defining myself through my own actions and choices. I traveled. I learned. I built something meaningful with my life. Sometimes late at night in my beautiful library, I would think about Catherine and feel grateful for her complicated legacy. She had spent her life trapped in roles that didn't fit her, but in the end, she had found a way to break free and help another woman do the same. The inheritance wasn't just about money. It was about power. Faye, the power to choose my own destiny, to value myself, to build a life based on who I truly was rather than who others expected me to be. Marcus had been wrong about one thing. I hadn't failed as a wife because I couldn't have children. I had succeeded as a human being because I had learned to love authentically, to care for others genuinely, and to find strength in the midst of betrayal. Catherine saw that. She recognized that my so-called weaknesses, Faye, my kindness, my loyalty, my refusal to become hard and calculating, Faye, were actually my greatest strengths. And in the end, those strengths had saved us both. Did you like my story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I am looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There is so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.